Hey everybody, it's Writerpunk. I've seen something of an uptick in the writing tip, all first drafts are garbage going around, so I wanted to explain why I absolutely hate that saying. Before we do any ranting, though, I want to try and define this term as I understand it, well, not really a term, this phrase as I understand it, and explain my thoughts on intention versus the actual meaning. So what I believe all first drafts are garbage intends to package up into a sort of neat little laconic phrase is that first drafts are rough and impermanent. They're going to have all sorts of kinks and inconsistencies, errors, gaps in logic, and they are not anywhere near ready for publication. However, this is not what all first drafts are garbage actually says. What it literally says, according to the definition of the words used, is each and every first draft is refuse, i.e., worthless. You could argue that it's a little bit pedantic to hate a piece of advice just because of how it's stated, but to that I say, in an art form like writing, what you say and how you say it matters. Things like word choice, tone, and actual meaning versus intended meaning are very important. This is a profession of semantics, definitions, and language. For example, if you're writing your story and you say, Sally hated the idea of weddings, but what your intended meaning is Sally hated the idea of the wedding everyone expected her to have. Those two sentences have two very different implications, and it will affect your reader's perception of Sally's opinion on weddings. Similarly, all first drafts are garbage does not actually say your first draft is going to be a rough approximation of a story. It actually says your first draft is worthless. And that's why I have a problem with it. I especially despise this tip when I account for my observation that it is mostly given to young or inexperienced writers in high-pressure situations who might not yet be able to discern the intended meaning of the phrase from its literal meaning. I was one of those writers when I was younger, and it definitely affected my ability to see any value in what I had accomplished and my desire to share my work with others. I know many writers who were or are the same. And, sure, from the point of view of the person giving the advice or criticism, it's probably easier to shoot off a little pithy phrase rather than exerting the effort to explain what you actually mean, in this case, your intended meaning. But at that point, I feel like it would be better to just maybe not say anything at all. The other secondary and perhaps hidden meaning that I see in the saying all first drafts are garbage is that it is used to dissuade someone from thinking that just because you have a first draft does not mean that it is a finished book that is ready to be packaged up and slung off to an agent or, Lulu or CreateSpace or whatever Amazon uses, or if you're just posting on something like Wattpad. And really, this is a hard truth that you will have to come to terms with as a writer, but that's also not what this actually says. What it actually says is, all first drafts are worthless, they're garbage, they're trash, they're nothing. The intent here, in terms of don't publish your first draft, I believe is a pure intent. It's to dissuade someone from perhaps embarrassing themselves or just being disappointed when their first draft manuscript is rejected or someone criticizes it or it gets really poor reviews. So, your story is going to go through hundreds, if not thousands, of changes as you write, revise, and edit. Through this process, your first draft serves as your pole star and the rawest form of your creativity. If nothing else, first drafts are the least well-polished version of your end product, but they are your map for creating that story that is what you are going to end up releasing to the general public or your friends and family or whoever. As you continue to write, you will write better first drafts and you will streamline the process, but that requires writing many first drafts. So, just by virtue of needing to write multiple first drafts to get better at writing books in general and also first drafts, that means that first drafts are not worthless. They are not garbage. They are not trash. First drafts are the literal opposite of worthless. Writing a manuscript is a monumental task. People who have not sat down to write a book in general don't really think about how difficult it is to write, at least in the fantasy genre, minimum of 80,000 words of the same story and make it make sense and not get bored of it. It's really hard to write a book. It's not a simple, easy, thing. Dare I say as well that most writers who set out to write a book will not actually finish a draft of it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you want to move on to something else, or if writing is just your hobby, you're entitled to do whatever you want. But for those who finish a first draft, you should not devalue your own accomplishment because it's imperfect, and you also should not allow others to devalue what you have accomplished because it isn't perfect. Another thing that gets said rather frequently is that you cannot edit a blank page. You also can't sell a blank page, nor can you post it online. If you can, I applaud your persuasion skills. But in order to edit or publish a book, first you have to, you gotta write a book. That necessitates completing a first draft. The first draft is the springboard off which you will develop your story and your skills and ideas that you will use in the future, and that itself makes first drafts worth something. Even if this particular manuscript gets locked in a box somewhere, or you just never look at it again on Google Docs or Word or whatever you use, you're still improving. You are improving yourself, you're improving your craft, you're improving your world if you're writing in the same setting like I do. No, first drafts are not perfect, but neither are second drafts or third drafts, or if you write 10 drafts or finished books. Published books aren't perfect. New York Times bestsellers are not perfect. Books are never truly done. There is no way to achieve perfection in artwork. You will simply polish your story to the point that you can say, all right, I like this, I think it's ready to release it, now I'm going to move on. So don't allow writing the perfect book to become the enemy of writing a book. I know it can be tempting as well to use sayings like all first drafts are garbage as a shield to defend yourself from bad remarks or criticism, or even your inner monologue, which can be really rough because you want to beat them to the punch and you want to say, well, you can't say anything that'll hurt me because I already think it's trash. I don't think this is necessarily the most helpful way to approach things. Like I say in my video about healthy habits to develop before NaNoWriMo, you should think constructively about your work. You should think positively about your work. You'll have a much easier time of writing in general if you can play to your strengths, but also improve your weaknesses. For example, when you go to edit your first draft and turn it into draft number 2, rather than devoting your attention to everywhere that the draft is deficient, try instead to make a note of where things do work and what characters do work and what plot lines are good and what scenes you like. You're going to have a much easier time trying to work with the things and knowing the things that you are going for instead of trying to write around everything that you don't like. this will also set a positive tone for your next draft that will likely make you feel a lot better about your ability and the manuscript. Self-flagellating by declaring your story is trash before you've even begun the second draft isn't going to make you better at writing. It's okay to be proud of things that aren't perfect, and it's okay to trunk a novel or to push it off to the side and say, no, I'm going to go work on something else. Happy artists make better art, in my opinion. And to my way of thinking, no story that you could ever write is totally unsalvageable. Will some stories require a lot more work to make them working stories? Yes. But nothing is ever truly a lost cause. Final thing I want to say is that when you are ready for outside critique, and I know this whole video is my personal opinion, but in my personal opinion, first drafts are rarely, if ever, ready for outside critique. Focus on getting constructive criticism from people who are familiar to you. This does not mean go ask your mom for critique. This means, if you have some writer friends and you want to do a manuscript exchange. I think that critique focused on solutions and improvement that comes from people who are invested in your success is going to help you more than just sending it off to, the bowels of Reddit or wherever to get just ripped apart. It's going to help you more. And then you won't have to feel like your first draft is garbage. Focus on constructive criticism. This is critique that is focused on solutions and improvement, as opposed to destructive criticism that zeroes in on every single conceivable error in the name of brutal honesty. And, final note, for the sake of everything pure and holy, please never throw away or delete any of your drafts. It can sometimes be absolutely impossible to get them back, and there might come a day when you wish that you still had it. First drafts are not garbage, so don't throw them away. But anyway, I think that's all I have to say about this topic. What do you think about the saying, all first drafts are garbage? Journal it, think about it, send it as a comment, keep it to yourself. However you want to do it. I always appreciate your subscriptions and comments and likes, and thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon.